More than 90 Tomahawk missiles hurtled into the Pacific at 550 miles per hour, each carrying a 1,000-pound warhead, smashing into China's airfields and command bunkers before anyone could call for help. April 3, 2025, China fired the first shot, confident that its vast kill network, hundreds of HQ-9 missiles, squadrons of J-16 fighters, and a dense network of radars could smash any weapon threatening Taiwan's territorial waters. What it didn't realize was that it was targeting the USS Gerald R. Ford Carrier Strike Group, a floating nuclear bastion generating more than 300 megawatts of power, controlling thousands of interceptors, stealth jets, and phased array sensors. In just 72 hours, China lost more than $5.7 billion, saw its coastal defenses destroyed, and retreated 200 miles inland, stunned by the scale of its own miscalculation. So how did this clash play out? And what chilling message does it send to every nation that dares challenge American power? Stay tuned. If you value incisive, fact-based military analysis like this video, subscribe and leave your thoughts below. It motivates us to dig deeper. At 6:45 a.m. on April 3, 2025, Chinese early warning radars along the Fujian coast picked up a large high-signature formation moving steadily through the Taiwan Strait, less than 80 nautical miles from their shores. The radar images and satellite feeds showed what they thought was a threatening system flying the American flag, possibly an advanced unmanned sensor array or a stealth drone flotilla drifting dangerously close to their declared maritime boundary. Inside PLA Southern Theater Command, the reaction was instant and uncompromising. Convinced this was a direct intrusion meant to probe or undermine their sovereignty, Chinese generals ordered a preemptive strike. They believed, almost arrogantly, that their layered defenses could crush any foreign platform. After all, the region bristled with HQ-9B surface-to-air missiles, each with a reach of 125 miles, radar homing seekers designed to hit even stealthy targets. Further inland, air bases scrambled J-16 and J-11 fighters, each armed with PL-15 missiles boasting 120-plus mile engagement ranges, ready to carve the sky into kill boxes. At the same time, near Xiamen and Shantou, self-propelled Type 730 CIWS batteries, firing over 4,200 rounds per minute, swiveled toward the air corridors, prepared to shred any missile or aircraft that came into range. By 6:52 a.m., dozens of missiles lit up the dawn sky, streaking toward the radar blips they assumed to be encroaching reconnaissance or weapons platforms. But here was their fatal miscalculation. The massive radar signatures didn't belong to vulnerable drones or isolated sensor pods. They belonged to the USS Gerald R. Ford Carrier Strike Group, the most powerful mobile military formation on Earth. The carrier itself, driven by two A-1B nuclear reactors generating more than 300 megawatts, supported a combat web of SPY-6 phased array radars and Aegis Baseline 10 fire control, directing hundreds of interceptors and electronic warfare countermeasures in real time. By choosing to fire without a challenge or diplomatic warning, China didn't just defend territory, they unknowingly triggered a direct, high-tech showdown with the might of the United States Navy. And in mere moments, they would learn what it meant to underestimate a force that had spent decades preparing to fight precisely this kind of war. Pretty unbelievable, right? But hold on, because what happened next would prove exactly why the US Navy's carrier groups are feared across every ocean. As the first Chinese missiles clawed through the upper atmosphere at Mach 4, the USS Gerald R. Ford Carrier Strike Group was already shifting into a war footing. Aboard the USS Gerald R. Ford, two A-1B nuclear reactors pumping out over 300 megawatts of power kept every radar, launch tube, and flight deck system surging with energy. This was a floating city designed for exactly this kind of high-stakes moment. The carrier's SPY-6 active electronically scanned array radar, capable of tracking over 1,000 targets simultaneously, instantly painted the inbound threats. Alongside the Ford, Arleigh Burke-class destroyers bristling with 96 vertical launch cells each spun up their Aegis Baseline 10 fire control systems, selecting optimal intercept windows in milliseconds. The first line of defense roared to life. SM-6 interceptors, with a blistering range of 230 miles and speed over Mach 3.5, shot skyward, hunting Chinese HQ-9s in the mid-course phase. Lower down, RIM 162 ESSMs sprang from their silos, accelerating to Mach 4 to slam into anything that pierced the outer ring. Nearer still, the carrier's own RIM 116 rolling airframe missiles, guided by passive RF and infrared seekers, crisscrossed the sky in deadly swarms, wiping out strays that threatened to slip through. Then came the final shield, the Phalanx CIWS, each pumping out over 4,500 depleted uranium rounds per minute, their 6-barrel Gatling guns spinning into blinding blurs as tracers arced toward the sea. Above all this, the Ford's deck launched a combat ballet. F-35C Lightning IIs, each carrying nearly 18,000 pounds of smart munitions, rocketed into the air on afterburner, climbing to establish a kill zone far from the carrier. Overhead, E-2D Advanced Hawkeyes kept a hawk-like eye on the battle space with ultra-long-range AESA radar, relaying every vector to pilots and shipboard combat information centers. Despite the ferocity of the Chinese barrage, most of it was chewed apart or misled by America's layered defenses. A few missiles detonated close enough to send brutal shockwaves across the Ford's flight deck, briefly rattling crew and aircraft parked topside. But within minutes, the entire strike group stabilized under a fortress of steel and electronic warfare. What China had expected to be a quick lesson in sovereignty enforcement instead ran headlong into the most advanced maritime defense grid humanity has ever built. A multi-tiered machine, seamlessly weaving together space assets, stealth fighters, surface combatants, and point defense guns into one lethal organism. And for Beijing, the true nightmare was only beginning. Are you still following us? Because what happens next will rewrite everything you thought you knew about modern warfare. Let's dive in. The cost of China's reckless strike became brutally clear in minutes. As their HQ-9 and PL-15 missiles fizzled under America's multi-layered defenses, the tables turned with chilling speed. High above the strait, U.S. F-35C Lightning IIs, flying under the protective eye of E-2D Hawkeyes, locked onto rising clusters of Chinese J-16 and J-11 fighters, many still scrambling from runways near Xiamen and Shantou. Guided by networked targeting data from SPY-6 radars and satellite uplinks, the F-35Cs unleashed volleys of AM-120D AMRAAMs, each boasting a range of over 90 miles and active radar homing that left Chinese pilots little chance to maneuver. Within seconds, bright blossoms of flame dotted the sky. Dozens of Chinese jets, valued at over $70 million apiece, spiraled into the sea or exploded mid-air, sending shockwaves of horror through PLA command bunkers. Desperate to salvage the situation, China's Type 054A frigates, equipped with HQ-16 surface-to-air systems and advanced search radars, tried to establish overlapping kill zones offshore. But their strategy unraveled almost immediately. Electronic attack pods aboard U.S. Growler escorts jammed their fire control frequencies, and then AGM-88 HARM missiles streaked in at Mach 2, homing on the telltale emissions of Chinese radar. One by one, the frigate's sensor masts and phased arrays erupted into molten wreckage. On land, coastal SAM batteries that had fired the first salvos now faced precise retribution. From over 30,000 feet, FA-18 Super Hornets dropped JDAM ER glide bombs, guided by encrypted GPS and inertial systems, achieving impact circles tighter than 30 feet. Concrete bunkers that had housed vital radar nodes shattered like paper under the explosive force. By the time the dust began to settle, China had lost more than 20 modern fighters, suffered crippling blows to at least 3 major naval vessels, and watched entire coastal defense zones go dark. The financial loss ran into billions of dollars. But even more damaging was the psychological rupture. China's leadership had believed its anti-access kill web could deter or destroy any American formation that dared creep near Taiwan. Instead, in just under an hour, that myth was reduced to twisted metal and rising columns of oily black smoke. Beijing's gamble had not just failed, it had backfired catastrophically, inviting an American counteroffensive of a scale and precision they were wholly unprepared to face. In the next moments, you'll see exactly how the United States unleashed a response so overwhelming it reshaped an entire coastline. Within an hour of the initial Chinese strike, The full might of America's carrier strike group pivoted from defensive survival to overwhelming retaliation. The USS Gerald R. Ford's Combat Direction Center, humming with terabytes of real-time targeting data from satellites, P-8 Poseidons and forward-deployed F-35Cs, compiled a ruthless strike matrix. Orders flowed down. In less than 5 minutes, steel hatches slid open across nearby destroyers and submarines. Arleigh Burke-class destroyers, each with 96 Vertical Launch System (VLS) cells, unleashed successive ripples of Tomahawk Block 4 cruise missiles. Traveling at 550 mph just above the sea surface, these stealthy missiles packed 1,000-pound warheads and navigated using terrain contour mapping, evading Chinese radar nets with chilling ease. Nearly 90 Tomahawks roared east in less than 10 minutes, their contrails weaving ghostly patterns across the low horizon. Beneath them, at depths beyond 500 feet, a Virginia-class nuclear attack submarine released its own spread of UGM-109s, striking from positions China's anti-submarine patrols had failed to even glimpse. The dual-axis assault overwhelmed what remained of PLA coastal tracking systems. When the missiles arrived, they didn't simply crater a few runways. Precision targeting software guided each warhead to critical nodes: command bunkers, long-range radar stations, hardened missile magazines. Explosions rippled outward in calculated sequences, turning what had been a dense, redundant coastal defense grid into smoldering gaps. In under 25 minutes, more than 15 major military installations were either gutted or outright erased. Overhead, the air war intensified. FA-18 Super Hornets, loaded with extended-range JDAMs and high-speed anti-radiation missiles, swept in at 30,000 feet, launching attacks from well outside the reach of most remaining Chinese defenses. Each Super Hornet carried nearly 17,000 pounds of mixed ordnance, creating rolling shockwaves that obliterated radar dishes and bunker entrances. Meanwhile, EA-18G Growlers jammed residual Chinese communication nets, sowing chaos in PLA response chains. Secure voice commands from inland bases never reached frontline batteries. By the time local commanders realized they were on their own, their launchers were already burning. Throughout the chaos, the carrier group never lowered its shield. SPY-6 radars aboard the Ford scanned continuously for retaliatory missiles, feeding tracking solutions to interceptors like the SM-6, capable of plucking out targets over 230 miles away at speeds exceeding Mach 3 and 5. Closer in, Phalanx guns still tracked for last-ditch threats, whirring with their unmistakable mechanical growl. In under 2 hours, China's once-proud anti-access bastion lay shattered. The multi-billion-dollar strategy that Beijing had paraded in white papers and press conferences, promising to keep American carriers thousands of miles from Taiwan, had been gutted in less time than a Major League Baseball doubleheader. For the officers aboard the USS Ford, there was no triumphal cheer, only cold, professional confirmation of what decades of doctrine and investment had built: the ability to dismantle a peer adversary's coastal fortress with breathtaking speed and near-total immunity. For China, the lesson would be seared into every smoking radar mast and cratered airfield along its southeastern shore. By dawn on April 5th, just 48 hours after China's rash decision to fire the first shot, the scope of devastation was undeniable. Satellite imagery from both American and neutral commercial sources showed a grim mosaic of charred runways, collapsed radar domes, and burned-out SAM batteries stretching along nearly 300 miles of China's southeastern coastline. Precise intelligence assessments estimated that China had lost over 40 modern fighters, J-16s and J-11s, valued collectively at more than $5.7 billion, either destroyed on the ground by precision-guided bombs or shot from the sky by AIM-120Ds. At least 5 long-range HQ-9 SAM battalions, each worth hundreds of millions, lay in twisted ruin, their scorched missile tubes pointing helplessly at the sky. Even more staggering was the loss of infrastructure. Over 15 major military facilities, including hardened ammunition depots, fuel farms, and sprawling command posts, were either obliterated or rendered operationally useless. For China, this meant years of rebuilding and untold billions in replacement costs, not to mention the strategic humiliation. PLA ground commanders withdrew the battered remnants of their air defense network over 200 miles inland, effectively conceding the entire coastline to American air and naval dominance. Coastal civilian ports went dark under blackout orders, terrified that any lingering radar signatures might trigger more U.S. strikes. In Beijing's highest war rooms, the mood shifted from bluster to sobering dread. The very kill web they had boasted would keep U.S. carriers beyond the second island chain had proven tragically hollow. What China believed to be an act of swift sovereignty enforcement instead unleashed a calibrated American onslaught that dismantled decades of investment in under 72 hours. The lesson couldn't have been clearer or more brutal. When you fire on the American flag, especially on a war machine like a nuclear carrier group, you aren't just provoking a regional skirmish, you are gambling your billion-dollar defenses, your best pilots, your coastal security, and perhaps your entire strategic credibility. And for China, the cost of that gamble was now painfully written across every cratered airfield and smoking bunker from Fujian to Guangdong. In less than 3 days, what began as a Chinese attempt to assert control over its maritime backyard by force turned into a devastating object lesson in modern naval warfare. Beijing's leaders, trusting in sprawling missile grids and long-range fighters, believed they could quickly humble an American task force, and instead watched billions in hardware vaporized, coastal defenses shattered, and their strategic aura darkened on the world stage. For the United States, it was a cold, professional validation of decades of investment in layered carrier defenses, long-range strike systems, and seamless joint targeting. No celebrations, no boasts. Just stark confirmation that when challenged head-on, America's might can still dismantle an entire anti-access strategy in under 72 hours. This clash left more than burning runways and twisted radar masts. It etched a chilling message across the Pacific. If you gamble by striking at the heart of American power, you risk losing not just ships or jets, but the credibility of your entire national deterrent. Please consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel. It helps us continue bringing you these deep dives into the world's most critical flashpoints. Thank you for watching. Q.